The police officer's voice was calm, too calm. "Mr. Reeves, we're familiar with this woman." My grip tightened around the phone. My pulse was so loud it drowned out the silence between us. He didn't need to say anything else. I already knew the next words would shatter me. You wait your whole life for a moment, and when it finally comes, it's nothing like you imagined. For as long as I can remember, there's been a hole in my life. People would talk about their mothers, the advice, the comfort, even the little quirks that drove them crazy, and I had nothing to add. My mother was a ghost, a name on a piece of paper, a question I could never answer. I used to wonder, was she alive? Did she ever think about me? Did she even remember that I existed? But over time I stopped asking. Some questions are just too painful to keep alive. And then, one ordinary afternoon, without warning, the question answered itself. I got an email from her. At least, that's what she claimed. She knew my name, my birthday, the hospital where I was born. She wrote as if she had been searching for me for decades, and in the space of a few sentences, she pulled me back into a world I thought I had left behind. I didn't know it then, but opening that email would be the single most dangerous decision of my life. And before this story is over, you'll understand why. My name is Daniel Reeves, and in 2020, my life was in a good place. I'd been working in high-end hospitality for over a decade, finally building the career I'd dreamed of. My partner and I had just found out we were expecting our first child. For the first time in years. Before that email, the biggest thing on my mind was painting the baby's room a pale green that wouldn't feel too boy or girl. Life was simple, steady. I didn't know it was about to be turned inside out. And then, one email changed everything. Growing up, my childhood was far from perfect. My father raised me alone, but he wasn't the kind of man you went to for warmth or comfort. He was strict, volatile, and quick to shut down any conversation that made him uncomfortable, especially if it was about my mother. Her name was on my birth certificate, but that was it. I didn't know where she lived, what she looked like, or why she left. I tried to find her once, as a teenager, but every lead went nowhere. Eventually, I stopped trying. It was easier to bury that ache than to live with constant disappointment. And then, out of the blue, I saw her name in my inbox. The subject line was simple: looking for Daniel. Inside was a message from a woman claiming to be my mother. She knew my full name, my birthday, the city and hospital where I was born, even the details about how I'd been taken from her and brought to England as a baby. At first, I thought it was a prank. But what if it wasn't? When I first saw her name in my inbox, I froze. I must have read the subject line, looking for Daniel, at least a dozen times before I opened it. The message was short, but it hit me like a punch to the chest. "Hi Daniel, I'm not sure if this is going to reach you as I've been searching for a way to contact you and found this email. My name's Teresa, though you might remember me as your mother. You were born in Germany before being taken to England." I just stared at the screen. She had details no stranger should know. My birthday, the name of the hospital where I was born, even the middle name that almost no one uses. At first, I laughed. It felt ridiculous. This kind of thing doesn't just happen. But then the laughter faded and a different thought took hold. What if it's true? I typed and deleted my reply half a dozen times before settling on something safe. "Hi, I'm not sure what to say, but maybe we should talk." We set up a call for that evening. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. And then I heard her voice. It wasn't the voice I'd imagined. Deeper, slower, tinged with something I couldn't quite place. But there was a softness to it, like she was choosing each word with care. She told me she'd been looking for me for years. She said she never stopped thinking about me. She even described a birthmark I had as a baby, something I'd only ever seen in an old photograph. We spoke for over an hour that night, about my childhood, about the life she'd built, or lost, since we'd last seen each other. She told me she'd made mistakes, but that losing me was the greatest regret of her life. By the time we hung up, I felt like a door had opened in my chest that had been locked for decades. I didn't know it yet, but every word we spoke was leading me closer to the moment I'd wish we'd never met. After that first call, We began speaking almost every day. Sometimes it was quick, just a good morning or a check-in about how my day was going. Other times, we'd talk for hours. She wanted to know everything: my childhood, my work, my friends, the kind of music I listened to. She laughed at my stories and shared her own, painting a picture of a life that had been hard but full of love, except for the part where she lost me. She told me about the years after I was gone, the jobs she'd taken just to survive, the nights she went hungry so she could pay rent, and the relationships that ended because she couldn't get past the grief of losing her son. There were hints, subtle ones, that she wasn't in a good place financially. She'd talk about choosing between fixing her car or paying the electricity bill, or about skipping meals when money was tight. I felt that instinctive pull, the urge to protect her, to make up for all the years I wasn't there, and yet, every so often, something in her stories wouldn't quite line up. A date that didn't match what she'd said before, a detail about my birth that contradicted another memory, but each time, I told myself the same thing: memories fade. Trauma messes with the way we remember. I didn't want to risk this fragile connection by questioning her. Weeks passed like this, each conversation pulling me in deeper. Then, one evening, after an especially emotional call, where we both ended up in tears, she said it. "Daniel, I don't want to just be a voice on the phone anymore." I didn't realize it then, but agreeing to what she suggested next would change everything. We decided to meet at a small cafe halfway between where we both lived. I got there 15 minutes early, but it felt like hours. My hands wouldn't stop sweating, and every time the door opened, my chest tightened. Then I saw her. She was smaller than I imagined, her frame wrapped in a long coat. Despite the mild weather, her hair was streaked with gray, and her eyes, my eyes, locked onto mine with a look I can't even describe. Relief? Joy? Guilt? Maybe all of it at once. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she smiled, and I stood up. The hug was awkward at first, stiff, uncertain. But then she squeezed me tighter, and the awkwardness dissolved. I could feel her shoulders shake, and it hit me. She was crying. We sat down and talked for hours. She told me about her life since we'd been apart, the jobs, the places she'd lived, the relationships that failed. She spoke about surviving on almost nothing, about sleeping on friends, couches, about the constant ache of not knowing where I was. I studied her face as she talked, searching for pieces of myself in her expressions. The way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the way she fidgeted with the spoon in her coffee. It was surreal, like looking into a mirror that reflected not just my face, but the life I could have lived. As the evening wound down, I walked her to the bus stop. The street was quiet, the glow of the street lights casting long shadows across the pavement. She took my hand and held it for a long time before speaking. "Daniel, there's something I need to tell you." I didn't know it yet, but whatever she was about to say would be the first crack in everything I thought I knew. We stood there under the streetlight, her hands wrapped around mine, when her tone shifted. "Daniel, there's a reason I contacted you now." I frowned, waiting for her to continue. She took a breath, her voice trembling just enough to make me lean in. "I've been sick for a while, and it's not the kind of sick you just get over. The doctors say I need surgery, heart surgery, and if I don't get it soon—" Her eyes glistened, and her voice cracked. "I might not have much time left." She explained that she'd been carrying this diagnosis for months, that she'd kept it to herself because she didn't want our first conversations to be about illness. But when her symptoms worsened, she said she couldn't stop thinking about me, her son, and how she might leave this world without ever seeing me again. I couldn't let that happen, Daniel. Even if I only had one day left, I had to look into your eyes and know you were real. I swallowed hard, unsure what to say. She reached up and brushed my cheek with her hand, a gesture that felt at once intimate and calculated. Then came the turn, but the surgery, it's expensive. The waiting list is long unless you can pay for part of it privately. I don't expect anything from you, not after all these years, but you're my only family now." The words hit me like a punch. It wasn't just a request. It was a choice she was planting in my head. Either help her or live with the guilt of letting her die. My chest tightened as she squeezed my hand and whispered, "I just want the chance to know you before it's too late." And that's when I made my first mistake. A few days after that meeting, she called me in the evening. Her voice sounded weaker, more fragile than before. "Daniel, I hate to ask you this, but the specialist needs me to have more tests before they can schedule anything. They said they can do them this week, but I have to pay up front. It's only a few hundred, more so." She let the words hang in the air, giving me space to fill the silence. And I did. I told her I'd cover it, without hesitation. She sighed. Not with relief, but with a kind of quiet gratitude that made me feel like I'd done something far more meaningful than just send money. "You don't know what this means to me, Daniel. I wish I could have been there for you all these years. This is the first time I've felt like I have my son back." I sent the payment that night. It wasn't about the money. It was about showing her that I believed her, that I was willing to be there for her the way I wished she'd been there for me. For the next couple of days, she called often. Short updates, little chats about how she was preparing for the tests. She started asking about my partner, about the baby on the way, even offering motherly advice that made me smile despite myself. Then, 3 days later, the tone shifted again. This time, her voice was shaking when she picked up. "Daniel, they found something. It's worse than they thought. The doctor says I can't wait months. I need surgery immediately. If I go through the public list, it'll take too long, and I might not survive." My heart started pounding. She didn't need to say the rest out loud. I already knew what she was leading me toward. "If I can raise the money for a private slot," she said softly, "they can do it in 2 weeks. Without it, I don't know if I'll still be here by the time my name comes up." And then she went quiet, waiting for me to speak. That was the moment I realized she was about to ask for far more than I ever expected. Once I agreed to help her with the surgery, everything moved fast. She sent me what looked like official medical documents, scans, invoices, letters from a cardiology clinic with a logo I recognized from Google searches. She forwarded emails from a supposed doctor explaining that they'd managed to secure an earlier slot, but that payment was required to confirm it. The numbers weren't small anymore. We weren't talking hundreds. We were talking tens of thousands. But every time I hesitated, I'd look at her messages, the way she wrote about wanting to live long enough to hold my child, the way she called me son at the end of every message, and I'd tell myself, "It's my mom. Money means nothing compared to her life." My partner noticed the withdrawals and asked questions. Friends told me I should slow down, double-check things, even talk to the hospital myself, but I defended her every single time. I told them they didn't understand, that I wasn't going to let the only chance to save my mother slip away because of suspicion. She had a way of making me feel like even pausing to think about it was a betrayal. If I took too long to reply, she'd message things like, "I thought you cared about me. I guess I was wrong." Or she'd remind me of all the years we'd lost, how she couldn't bear to lose more time. The payments kept coming. £20,000 here, £15,000 there, each time with a promise that this would finally be enough. And each time, something new came up. And then, one morning, I called her, and the number was disconnected. I sent a message. No reply. I checked her social media. Gone. Just like that, she vanished. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People lose their phones, reception drops. Maybe she was resting after another round of treatment. But when the second day passed without a reply, the knot in my stomach tightened. I called again, straight to voicemail. I sent messages. No read receipts. Her Facebook profile? Deleted. Instagram? Gone. Even the email address she'd used vanished. Every message I sent bounced back with an error. That's when the fear hit. I thought maybe she'd collapsed. Maybe she was lying in some hospital bed, alone, wondering why I hadn't come. I imagined the worst, and I couldn't bear the thought that I wasn't there for her. So I called the hospital she'd mentioned. I told them her name, explained she was my mother, that she'd been under their care for weeks. There was a long pause on the other end. Then the woman said, "I'm sorry, sir. We have no patient by that name." I gave them the name of the doctor from the emails. They had never heard of him. The letterhead, the invoices, the supposed appointment slips. None of them matched anything in their system. My mouth went dry. I wanted to argue, to tell them they were wrong, that there had to be some mistake. But deep down, something inside me shifted. The truth made my blood run cold. The next call I made was to the police. I didn't know what else to do. My head was spinning, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I gave them everything: her name, the phone numbers, the bank account details I'd transferred money to, even the emails and supposed medical bills. A detective called me back 2 days later. His tone was calm, professional, but it was the kind of calm that tells you bad news is coming. "Mr. Reeves, we're familiar with this woman." I sat there in silence as he told me she was a serial scammer with a long criminal record. Fraud, identity theft, deception. She had been running cons like this for years, targeting people who were vulnerable, people desperate for a connection. She'd done this to others, dozens of them. A man who thought she was his long-lost sister. A woman convinced she'd found her biological aunt. Each story tailored perfectly to the person she was targeting. And me? She found me because of a post I'd made years earlier in an online forum, searching for information about my mother. My words had been public. My vulnerability, my longing. All of it was right there for her to read. She never had a heart condition. She never had surgery scheduled. Every document, every email, every doctor's note, all of it was fake. The woman I thought had given me life had only taken from me. Losing her was nothing like I imagined, because this time, I wasn't just losing a person, I was losing the idea of her. For years, I'd built her up in my mind as someone who might one day fill that missing space in my life. Someone who would finally make me feel whole. That hope had been my comfort on the loneliest nights. And now I knew it had all been a lie. The grief was different from any I'd felt before. It wasn't just sadness. It was anger, humiliation, and shame all tangled together. I couldn't even bring myself to say her name out loud anymore. Financially, I was wrecked. £300,000 gone. Money I had worked years to save. Money I'd planned to use to give my own child a secure future. Instead, I was drowning in debt, facing questions from banks, accountants, even friends I could barely look in the eye. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the betrayal of trust. She had taken something far more valuable than my savings. She had taken my belief in people, in family, in the idea that blood somehow means safety. The lesson I learned? Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who see your heart as an opportunity. I wanted to believe I'd found my family, and that hope blinded me. I ignored the red flags because I didn't want them to be real. I told myself that love, even a love just beginning, deserved trust. But the truth is, not everyone who reaches for you is doing it to hold you up. Some are reaching because they've already decided how to pull you down. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: protect yourself. Hope is a beautiful thing, but hope without caution is dangerous. The people who scam us aren't always strangers on the internet. Sometimes they sound like family. Sometimes they look like family. And sometimes they call you son. I'm sharing this because I don't want anyone else to go through what I did. If even one person hears this and stops to think twice, then maybe some good can come from what happened. Have you ever been targeted by a scam like this? Have you trusted someone who turned out not to be who they claimed? I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments. And if you want more true stories that uncover the lies people live behind, subscribe. We have more to talk about.